started with a pair of keys. I was in my office, flipping through paperwork for the business, when I noticed Megan's spare car key on my desk. Nothing unusual about it, until I remembered she hadn't been in my office for weeks. Her usual routine was to toss her keys on the kitchen counter or leave them in the hall. Why were they here? It wasn't paranoia, not at first. I assumed she'd left them there by accident. But the thought stuck with me like a splinter. Megan was meticulous about her keys. She even had a hook for them by the door. It didn't add up. Later that evening, while Megan was upstairs bathing the kids, I decided to satisfy my curiosity. I grabbed her keys and unlocked her car. My plan? To find her sunglasses or some receipt she might have misplaced. Just something to put my mind at ease. Instead, I found an envelope stuffed between the passenger seat and the center console. My hands felt clammy as I slid it out. The handwriting on the front stopped me cold. To Megan, with love. Inside was a card. Not just any card, though. It was one of those cheesy, over-the-top romantic ones with glitter hearts and cursive. The message? I didn't even get halfway through before my chest tightened. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. Every moment with you is worth the wait. Yours forever, Jason. Jason. I read it twice, 3 times, trying to force the words into some other meaning. Maybe it was a joke? A prank? But then I saw the date. The note had been written 3 days ago, the same night Megan had been working late. I could still hear her voice in my head, telling me she'd picked up an extra shift to help out at the clinic. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, shoved the keys into my pocket, and walked back inside. My mind raced. Who the hell was Jason? How long had this been going on? And how much of my life was a lie? That night, Megan came downstairs after putting the kids to bed. Her face lit up by the soft glow of her phone. She barely noticed me sitting in the corner of the living room, watching her. I don't think I blinked for 5 full minutes. "Everything okay?" she asked, finally looking up. Her tone was casual, but there was something guarded in her eyes. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a long day at work." She nodded, and that was the end of it for her. But for me, something had shifted. The woman standing in front of me wasn't just Megan anymore. She was someone I didn't recognize, someone who might be capable of anything. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I replayed every moment from the past few months, trying to piece together what I'd missed. And all I could think about was that card, Jason's handwriting, and the way Megan had smiled at her phone earlier. This wasn't going to end well. The next day, I decided to play it cool. No accusations, no confrontations, at least not yet. I needed more than a glittery card before I brought the house down. But inside, I was boiling. Every glance at Megan felt like staring at a stranger. Every word out of her mouth felt rehearsed, calculated. By mid-morning, I was at the office, trying to focus on the mountain of work piling up. But all I could think about was Jason. Who was he? A coworker? A random fling? My thoughts were interrupted by my phone buzzing on the desk. It was Megan. I hesitated before answering, steadying my voice. "Hey, what's up?" Her tone was cheerful, almost too cheerful. "Hey, babe, can you do me a huge favor and pick up some milk on your way home? I completely forgot this morning, and the kids want cereal for dinner." "Sure," I said, keeping my voice even. "Anything else?" "Nope. Love you." The words felt hollow, like an echo of a script she'd been following for years. I hung up and stared at the screen. Something about the call didn't sit right. Then it hit me. She didn't need to call me for milk. We had an app where we shared our grocery list. She updated it religiously. It was practically her religion. Megan asking me directly was out of character. Almost like she wanted to hear my voice, make sure I was where I said I'd be. I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair, my mind racing again. Was she testing me? Making sure I wasn't catching on? I needed to get ahead of this. At lunch, I took a detour and drove by the clinic where Megan worked. Her car was parked in its usual spot, but as I sat in the lot, something caught my eye. A man standing at the side entrance, talking on his phone. He was tall, with dark hair and a polished look, wearing a crisp shirt that screamed too much cologne. I don't know why I stayed. Something about him made my stomach churn. He wasn't a patient. He looked too comfortable, too familiar. And then I saw Megan. She came out the side door, her smile wider than I'd seen in months. She handed him something, a coffee cup maybe, and their fingers brushed. It was quick, but not quick enough. He leaned in, said something that made her laugh, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss her. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This was Jason. It had to be, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. Not here. I needed more. I needed proof so undeniable that even Megan's silver tongue couldn't spin her way out of it. I drove back to the office, my mind swirling. When I walked in, one of my employees, Kevin, noticed my face. "You good, boss?" "Fine," I muttered. But inside I was anything but. By the time I got home that evening, Megan was in full mom mode, helping the kids with homework and talking about their day. She was so convincing, so normal. If I hadn't seen her with Jason, I might have believed it. But now, everything she did felt like a performance. I went upstairs to shower. But instead, I locked myself in our bedroom and opened her laptop. Megan was careful, her emails were clean, her browsing history pristine. But then I found a folder buried in the depths of her cloud storage. It was innocuously titled Work Notes, but inside were screenshots of texts. From Jason. "Can't wait to see you again, gorgeous. I dream about those nights together. I hate lying, but it's worth it to have you in my arms." I closed the laptop and sat there, my heart pounding. I've been right. This wasn't just a fling. Megan wasn't just distracted. She was leading a double life, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The rage was bubbling under my skin like a volcano ready to blow. That evening, I decided to push Megan. Not a full confrontation, but enough to see how she'd react under pressure. I needed to know just how deep her betrayal ran. Dinner was quiet, too quiet. The kids were talking about school, their voices a blur in the background as I watched Megan, dissecting every move she made. She was too composed, too casual, like a performer on stage hitting all her marks. After the kids went to bed, I cornered her in the kitchen. "So," I started, leaning against the counter, "how's work been?" She barely looked up from loading the dishwasher. "Same as always. Busy." I nodded, pretending to be casual. "You guys seem to be putting in a lot of overtime these days. Everything okay at the clinic?" Her hands paused for the briefest moment before she resumed loading a plate. "Yeah, short-staffed as usual. Why do you ask?" "Just curious." I shrugged, walking over to the fridge and grabbing a beer. "Oh, by the way, I swung by the clinic during lunch today. Thought I'd surprise you." Her head shot up so fast I thought she might get whiplash. "What? Why?" I took a slow sip, watching her carefully. "Had some time to kill. Thought we could grab lunch together. But you were busy." Her face shifted, her smile faltering for a split second before she plastered it back on. "Oh yeah, sorry about that. I had back-to-back patients. You should have texted me." "Next time," I said, keeping my tone light, but inside, my suspicions were confirmed. She was lying and she knew I knew. For a moment we just stood there, staring at each other. It was a silent standoff, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how much I knew. Finally, she broke the tension. "Listen," she said, forcing a laugh. "If you want to surprise me, maybe call ahead next time. Work's been so crazy, and I hate when you waste your lunch break like that." Her words sounded reasonable, even sweet, but I wasn't buying it. "Good idea," I said, draining the beer and setting the bottle on the counter. "Wouldn't want to catch you off guard." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she turned back to the sink. I left the kitchen, my heart pounding. She was good at this, I'd give her that. If I hadn't found Jason's texts, I might have believed her. But now I was certain of two things. Megan was a liar and she was hiding something big. That night, while she slept beside me, I made a decision. Enough sneaking around. It was time to take this to the next level. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. She had a lock on it, but I'd seen her punch in the code 100 times. I held my breath as I tapped it in 11/24, our wedding anniversary. The home screen lit up and I was in. What I found made my blood run cold. There were messages from Jason, just as I'd expected. But what I didn't expect were the photos. Selfies of them together in a car. A picture of her laughing in what looked like a hotel room. And then there was the worst one. Megan, in a dress I didn't recognize, sitting across from Jason at a candlelit table, holding his hand. The caption under it read, "My happy place." My hand shook as I stared at the screen. My happy place? After 10 years of marriage, 2 kids, and everything we'd built, this was what she called her happy place? I almost woke her up right then and there, ready to unleash the fury building inside me. But I stopped myself. No, this wasn't the time. Not yet. I copied every message, every photo, and emailed them to myself. Then I locked her phone and put it back on the nightstand just as she stepped out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel. "Morning," she said with a smile, like nothing was wrong. "Morning," I replied, matching her tone. But inside, I was already planning my next move. If Megan wanted to play games, she'd just met her match. By the time I got to the office that morning, I was running on pure adrenaline. The photos, the messages, it was all I could think about. Every smile Megan had ever given me now felt like a joke, a lie wrapped in sweetness. But I wasn't just going to sit back and stew in my anger. If she wanted a war, I was ready. I started by calling a lawyer. Not to file for divorce yet, but to understand my options. 10 years of marriage, 2 kids, and a business Megan had helped me grow meant this wouldn't be simple. The lawyer, an older man named Carl, didn't mince words. "If she's cheating, you need evidence. Hard evidence. Courts don't care about suspicions or feelings. They care about proof." Proof. I already had some, those photos, those texts, but I needed more. Something undeniable. Something that would leave Megan with no leverage when the time came. That afternoon, I hired a private investigator. His name was Jim, a grizzled guy who looked like he'd been in this business longer than I'd been alive. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Give me the basics," he said, jotting notes in a battered notebook. I told him everything, the card, the messages, the hotel room photo. He nodded, unfazed. "You're dealing with someone who's bold. People like her get sloppy. I'll find what you need." The plan was simple. Jim would follow Megan for the next few days, track her movements, and dig into Jason's background. Meanwhile, I would play the loving husband, keeping things as normal as possible at home. It wasn't easy. That evening, when Megan kissed me hello and asked about my day, I had to fight the urge to pull her into the kitchen and confront her with the photos. Instead, I smiled, cooked dinner, and helped the kids with their homework. Later, after the kids were in bed, Megan curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. She looked so at ease, so comfortable, it made me sick. I sat across from her, pretending to scroll through my phone. "So, any plans this weekend?" I asked casually. She shrugged. "Not really. Why? Do you have something in mind?" "I thought we could do something as a family," I said, watching her face closely. Her eyes flickered for a split second, and then she smiled. "That sounds nice. Let me check my schedule tomorrow." Check her schedule? She worked weekdays, not weekends. What could she possibly have to check? The next day, Jim called me with an update. "She's careful, but not careful enough," he said. "She met a guy at a coffee shop this morning. They sat in a corner booth, real cozy, holding hands. Jason. Most likely. I followed him after he left. He works in real estate. Married, no kids." That last part hit me like a punch to the gut. Married. Jason was just as much of a liar as Megan. Jim continued. "She went back to the clinic after their meeting, but I've got enough to tie them together. Want me to keep digging?" "Absolutely," I said. "I need everything." That evening, I started putting together a file. Photos, texts, timelines. I wanted it all in one place, a bomb ready to detonate. But even as I prepared for the confrontation, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about catching Megan anymore. This was about taking control. About making sure she didn't walk away with my kids, my business, and everything I'd worked for. Megan thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what was coming. 2 days later, Megan made her first mistake. It was a Saturday morning, and I was in the garage, pretending to organize tools while watching the driveway through the side window. Megan had mentioned earlier that she was meeting Sarah for brunch. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but now, every word she said felt like a breadcrumb leading me closer to the truth. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Megan came downstairs, dressed to kill. She was wearing a black dress I hadn't seen before, paired with heels that were far too fancy for a casual brunch. "Wow," I said, leaning against the counter as she grabbed her purse. "Brunch with Sarah must be pretty upscale these days." She smirked and waved me off. She wanted to check out that new place downtown. You know how she is. I nodded, watching her carefully. "Text me if you need me to pick you up. You're going to have mimosas, right?" She laughed, slipping her phone into her bag. "I'll be fine. Don't wait up." As soon as the door closed behind her, I grabbed my phone and texted Jim. "She just left. Black dress. Heading downtown." Jim responded almost immediately. "Got it. I'm already nearby." Now all I had to do was wait. 2 hours later, I got a call. Jim didn't waste time with pleasantries. "They're at a hotel." My heart dropped into my stomach. "What?" "They had brunch at a cafe first. Cozy, like last time. Then they walked across the street to the Marriott." I tailed them inside. They went straight to the elevators. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "Room number." "I'm working on it," Jim said. "But I got photos of them holding hands in the lobby. You've got enough to blow this wide open if you want." "No," I said through gritted teeth. "Keep digging. I need more." "Your call," he said. "I'll stay here as long as I can." I hung up and paced the kitchen, my mind racing. A hotel. This wasn't just some emotional affair. Megan and Jason were going all the way right under my nose. An hour later, Jim texted again. "Room 426. Checked in under his name. They've been up there for 45 minutes. I stared at the message, my chest tight with rage. I could drive there right now, storm into that hotel, and end the charade in one explosive moment. But I knew that wouldn't get me what I needed. Megan would spin it, twist it, make herself the victim. I couldn't let that happen. Instead, I called Carl, my lawyer. "I have confirmation," I said, my voice steady. He didn't sound surprised. "Good. Don't confront her yet. Let your PI gather everything. The more evidence we have, the cleaner this will go when we file." "When?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Carl's voice softened. "I know it's hard, but you're doing the right thing. Just keep playing the part for now. The longer she thinks she's in the clear, the more reckless she'll get." I hung up and stared at the wall, my emotions a tangled mess of fury, betrayal, and heartbreak. By the time Megan came home that afternoon, I had plastered a smile on my face, the mask I'd been wearing for days. She walked in, all casual confidence, carrying a small shopping bag like she'd spent the day browsing boutiques. "How was brunch?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Great," she said, setting the bag on the counter. "Sarah loved the new place. We should go sometime." I forced a chuckle. "Sounds good." She kissed me on the cheek and headed upstairs to rest, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the truth I now held like a loaded weapon. She thought she'd gotten away with it, but I wasn't playing her game anymore. This was my game now, and she was about to lose. The next morning, I woke up before Megan, my mind already racing. I'd barely slept, replaying everything I knew over and over again. Her lies, Jason, the hotel. It all painted a picture I couldn't unsee. But now I had a plan. Megan spent the morning in her usual routine, acting like nothing was wrong. She played with the kids, laughed at breakfast, and even kissed me on the cheek before heading upstairs to do laundry. Watching her felt like watching a stranger, someone who had mastered the art of deceit. By mid-afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Jim's voice on the other end was sharp, direct. "I've got everything. Photos, timestamps, even security footage from the hotel lobby." "Send it all," I said, my voice cold. Minutes later, my email dinged. I opened the files and stared at the evidence. Each photo another nail in the coffin of our marriage. There was Megan holding Jason's hand. Megan, leaning into him, her eyes glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. Megan, walking into the elevator with him, her body language screaming intimacy. I forwarded everything to Carl with a single line. "Do what you need to do." Carl responded almost immediately. "This is ironclad. Meet me tomorrow to finalize paperwork." The rest of the day passed in a haze. I kept up appearances, playing the part of the unsuspecting husband while inside, I was seething. Every time Megan smiled at me or laughed with the kids, it felt like a slap in the face. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I decided to test the waters. "Hey," I said casually as Megan curled up on the couch with her tablet. "Have you talked to Sarah today?" Her head shot up, her expression guarded. "Why?" "Just wondering. You seemed to have such a good time yesterday. Thought you might have made plans to see her again." She relaxed, her smile returning. "No, not today. She's busy with her sister's baby shower stuff." I nodded, pretending to believe her, but her answer was too perfect, too rehearsed. "You know," I continued, "it's funny. I ran into her husband at the hardware store this morning. He didn't mention anything about a baby shower." Her face froze for the briefest moment before she forced a laugh. "Oh, maybe it's next weekend. I'm not sure of the exact date." She was scrambling, and I could see it. The cracks in her facade were starting to show. The moment she went upstairs, I grabbed her tablet and entered the same passcode as her phone. It unlocked, and within seconds, I found what I was looking for. An email thread with Jason. The subject line read, "This weekend." Jason's last message was simple. "Rooms booked. Can't wait to see you again." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my vision reddened. This wasn't just a mistake or a one-time lapse in judgment. Megan had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. I snapped a screenshot and added it to the growing file of evidence. Then I put the tablet back exactly where I found it, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and resolve. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about survival, mine and the kids. When Megan came back downstairs, her smile was easy, carefree. "You look tired," she said, settling next to me on the couch. "I am," I said, forcing a yawn. "Long day at work." She kissed my cheek, her lips warm and soft, but it felt like poison. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through the steps I needed to take. Megan thought she had me fooled, thought she could keep spinning her web of lies. But she was wrong. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in days, my mind wasn't a chaotic swirl of rage and betrayal. Instead, it was focused, sharp. Today was the day I would start dismantling the illusion Megan had built. I dropped the kids off at school, kissed them on the head, and told them I loved them. The thought of them being caught in the fallout made my chest ache, but I couldn't let Megan's lies infect their lives. This was about protecting them, even if it meant ripping everything else apart. After the drop-off, I met Carl at his office. "You've got enough to not only file for divorce but also to gain the upper hand in custody," he said, spreading the evidence across his desk like a damning mosaic. "These photos, the messages, it's undeniable. Judges don't look kindly on infidelity, especially when it involves sneaking around during family time." "What about the business?" I asked, my voice steely. "That's trickier," Carl admitted. "She could claim a share since she's been part of your life while you built it, even if she didn't contribute directly. But with the right strategy and this evidence, we can minimize her claims. She's not going to walk away with your company." I nodded, my jaw tight. "File the papers. I want this done." Carl handed me a pen, and I signed the documents with a resolve I didn't know I had. "Now," he said, leaning back in his chair, "how do you want to handle the confrontation? Public? Private? Subtle? Or do you want to make it hurt?" The question lingered in the air. I thought about Megan, sitting at home, probably texting Jason under the guise of folding laundry. I thought about her smile, her laugh, the way she kissed me like nothing was wrong. "Private," I said finally. "But I'm not pulling punches." Carl nodded. "Fair enough. When do you want to do it?" "Tonight." I spent the rest of the day preparing. I went home, worked in my office, and pretended everything was normal. Megan was her usual self, flitting around the house, texting on her phone, and chatting with the kids after school. "Do you need anything from the store?" she asked as she walked past my office. "No, I'm good," I said without looking up. I could feel her hovering for a moment before she moved on. That hesitation, it was like she could sense the shift in the air but couldn't quite place it. By dinner, my plan was locked in place. I played along through the meal, asking the kids about school, laughing at their jokes, and pretending everything was fine. Megan joined in, her laughter ringing hollow to me now. After the kids were in bed, I poured us each a glass of wine and sat down at the kitchen table. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. Megan raised an eyebrow, her glass halfway to her lips. "About what?" "About you," I said, setting my phone on the table between us. She froze, her eyes flicking to the phone and then back to me. "What's going on?" I took a sip of wine, savoring the pause. "I think you know." Her face faltered for the briefest second before she regained her composure. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Jason," I said, the name hitting the air like a thunderclap. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the glass down. "Who's Jason?" I unlocked my phone and opened the photos Jim had sent me. One by one, I slid them across the table, watching her face as she looked at each one. The hotel lobby, the elevator, the texts, the hotel room door. Her face turned pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "Oh," I leaned back, crossing my arms. "So, you're not sneaking off to hotels with a married man? You're not lying to me, to the kids, about where you've been?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "I trusted you," I said, my voice rising. "I built a life with you, gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By playing house with some guy named Jason." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. I can explain," she said weakly. "Explain what? That you've been cheating? That you've been lying to me for God knows how long? Go ahead, Megan. I'm all ears." Her face crumpled, and the tears started flowing. But they weren't the tears of someone who regretted what they'd done. They were the tears of someone who'd been caught. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Sorry," I said, standing up. "You're sorry? You don't even know what that word means. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught." She didn't argue. She just sat there, sobbing into her hands as I stared down at her, my anger burning brighter than her crocodile tears. "This is over," I said finally, my voice cold. "You want Jason? Go have him. But you're not taking my kids, my business, or my life with you. That ends now." Megan looked up at me, her eyes wide and red. "What are you saying?" "I've already filed the papers," I said, my tone final. "We're done." Her sobs turned to gasps, but I didn't care anymore. The game was over, and she had lost. Megan sat at the table, stunned, her face shifting from disbelief to anger in a matter of seconds. The tears stopped as quickly as they'd started, replaced by something cold, calculating. "You filed for divorce?" she hissed, her voice trembling. "That's right," I said, standing firm. "It's done. I've had enough of your lies, Megan." She scoffed, wiping at her eyes. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It wasn't serious. It was just a stupid mistake." "A mistake," I barked, slamming my hand on the table. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. Sneaking off to hotels with Jason isn't a mistake. It's a deliberate choice, and don't even try to downplay it. I've seen the photos. I've seen the messages. Don't insult my intelligence." Her face twisted into something venomous, a side of her I hadn't seen before. "You've been spying on me?" I laughed bitterly. "Don't even try to flip this on me. You were the one sneaking around. You think I wouldn't notice when my wife of 10 years suddenly had a secret life?" She stood up, crossing her arms. "I was unhappy. You've been so focused on your stupid business that you didn't even notice I was miserable." "Oh, don't you dare," I shot back. "I worked my ass off for this family. For you. I was building a future while you were out playing house with Jason." Her jaw clenched, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. But then, her expression shifted, and I knew what was coming. She was about to go for the jugular. "You think you're perfect?" she sneered. "You're not. You've been so wrapped up in yourself that you didn't even notice how distant we've been. You're just as much to blame for this as I am." "Blame?" I said, incredulous. "You're blaming me for your affair?" She shrugged, her voice cold. "Maybe if you'd paid more attention, I wouldn't have had to look somewhere else." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let her see it. Instead, I stared her down, my anger boiling over. You know what? You can tell yourself whatever lies you need to sleep at night. But this isn't on me. You chose this, Megan. You destroyed this marriage, not me. She rolled her eyes, her lips curling into a bitter smile. Fine. Divorce me, then. But don't think for 1 second you're going to walk away with everything. I've been here for 10 years. I've put just as much into this family as you have. I leaned in, my voice low and steady. You really think you're walking out of this with my business? My kids? Think again. I've got evidence, Megan. Judges don't take kindly to cheaters. You want to fight? Bring it on. But I promise you, you won't win. Her confidence faltered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with defiance. We'll see about that. The tension in the room was suffocating, the air thick with unspoken threats and years of resentment. Megan grabbed her wine glass and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the wreckage of what was once our life together. As I stood there, staring at the empty table, I realized something. This wasn't going to be clean or easy. Megan wasn't going to go quietly. She was gearing up for a fight. But so was I. Megan didn't waste any time showing her hand. By the next morning, she'd shifted from denial to full-on attack mode. When I came downstairs, she was already on the phone, her voice sharp and accusatory. I can't believe he'd do this, she said, pacing the kitchen, one hand on her hip. After everything I've sacrificed for him, he's trying to make me look like the bad guy. She glanced at me as I walked in, her expression venomous, but she kept talking, her voice deliberately loud. I'm not going down without a fight. He's not taking my kids. He's not taking everything I've worked for. I poured myself a cup of coffee, deliberately ignoring her. If she wanted to play the victim, let her. It didn't matter what lies she spun to her friends or family. I had the truth and I was ready to use it. After she hung up, she turned to me, her eyes blazing. You think you're so smart, don't you? I sipped my coffee, keeping my voice calm. I think I'm done putting up with your lies. Her laugh was sharp and bitter. You don't get to play the martyr here. You're not as perfect as you think. Neither are you, I said, my tone icy. But at least I'm not the one sneaking around with someone else's husband. Her face flushed with anger. But before she could respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Carl. Confirmed. She's trying to drain your shared accounts. Freeze them immediately. My stomach clenched. Of course, Megan wouldn't go down quietly. She was going to fight dirty. Without a word, I walked out of the kitchen and into my office, locking the door behind me. I called the bank and froze all our joint accounts. It wasn't a move I wanted to make lightly, but Megan had forced my hand. By the time I came back out, she was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone with a smug expression. You'll regret this, she said without looking up. Maybe, I said, leaning against the doorway, but not as much as you'll regret underestimating me. The rest of the day was a tense standoff. Megan barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was laced with venom. I could feel her plotting, her mind working overtime to figure out her next move. That evening, after the kids were asleep, she dropped her next bombshell. I've spoken to a lawyer, she said, her tone dripping with false confidence. Good, I said, not missing a beat. You'll need one. Her eyes narrowed. Don't think you're going to paint me as the bad guy here. I've done just as much for this family as you have. I deserve my fair share. Fair share, I said, raising an eyebrow. Is that what Jason told you? That you'd get half of everything and ride off into the sunset? Her jaw clenched, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. You're delusional, she snapped. The judge is going to see right through you. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. The judge is going to see exactly who you are, Megan. I've got photos, messages, hotel receipts. You think you can spin this in your favor? Good luck. For the first time, I saw fear flash across her face. It was brief, but it was there. She knew she was cornered, and now it was a question of how far she'd go to claw her way out. Enjoy your little victory lap, she said, grabbing her wine glass and storming upstairs. It won't last. As I watched her go, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and a grim sense of satisfaction. Megan thought she could manipulate her way out of this, but she'd underestimated me. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was a battle, and I wasn't going to lose. The next day, Megan escalated her war. I'd expected resistance, maybe some emotional manipulation, but I wasn't prepared for how far she'd go. I got a call from Jim around noon while I was in my office. His voice was calm but had an edge that made me sit up straight. "You're not going to like this," he said. "What is it?" "She met with Jason again this morning, but they weren't alone. She brought your kids." My grip on the phone tightened. "What?" "She took them to a cafe downtown. Jason was there, acting like they're one big happy family. He bought them muffins, joked around with them. It looked like he was trying to charm them. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My kids. She'd involved my kids in this mess, parading them in front of Jason like it was normal. "Did you get photos?" I asked, my voice tight with rage. "Of course," Jim said. "I'll send them over. But you need to act fast. She's not just trying to hurt you. She's trying to turn this into a new life with him." As soon as I hung up, the photos came through. There they were. My kids, sitting at a table with Jason, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. And Megan. She looked relaxed, happy even, as if she wasn't tearing apart our family. I slammed my fist onto the desk, the rage bubbling up again. This wasn't just about us anymore. She was dragging the kids into her delusional fantasy, and I couldn't let it happen. I called Carl immediately. "She's involving the kids now," I said, my voice shaking. "She took them to meet Jason." There was a pause on the other end. "That's good for us," Carl said finally. "Judges take parental behavior into account. This will show she's prioritizing her affair over her children's well-being." "Good for us?" I snapped. "What about the kids? They're confused, and she's using them like props." "I understand," Carl said calmly. "We'll address that in court. But for now, you need to keep documenting everything. Don't confront her until we have a hearing date." I hung up, my stomach churning. Playing the long game might have been the smart move legally, but emotionally it felt like torture. That evening, when Megan came home with the kids, she acted like nothing had happened. She laughed with them, helped them with their homework, and even asked me how my day had been. "Busy?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Tell me about it," she said with a smile. "These two were a handful today." My blood boiled at her audacity. "I'm sure Jason helped you manage," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. Her face froze for a split second before she recovered. "Jason?" she said, laughing nervously. "What are you talking about?" I stood up from the table, glaring at her. "Don't lie to me, Megan. I know you took the kids to meet him." The kids looked up, confused. Megan shot me a warning glare. "Can we not do this in front of them?" I clenched my fists and forced myself to take a deep breath. "Fine, but we're talking later." After the kids were in bed, I cornered her in the living room. "What the hell were you thinking?" I demanded. "Taking our kids to meet him? What kind of mother does that?" She folded her arms, her face defiant. "They're my kids too, and I'll introduce them to whoever I want." "Like hell you will," I said, my voice rising. "You're not dragging them into your mess. They don't need to meet your fling, Megan. They don't deserve to be part of your lies." Her eyes narrowed. "You're just jealous because they liked him. They had fun. Something they don't have when you're around." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let her see the hurt. "This isn't about me, and you know it. This is about you crossing a line. If you keep involving the kids in your fantasy life with Jason, I'll make sure you regret it." She smirked, the look on her face both infuriating and chilling. "Good luck with that." I stepped closer, my voice low and deadly. "I don't need luck. I've got proof. Keep pushing me, Megan. See how far you get." She stared at me for a long moment, the defiance in her eyes flickering just slightly. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, fists clenched, heart pounding. She thought this was a game she could win, but she just made the biggest mistake of all, involving my kids, and I wasn't going to let that slide. The line had been crossed, and there was no turning back now. Megan thought she could use the kids as pawns in her game with Jason, but she had underestimated just how far I was willing to go to protect them. The next morning, I didn't even wait for Megan to leave the house. After she dropped the kids off at school, I called Carl to strategize. She's involving the kids now, I said, pacing the length of my office. I want to hit her hard, fast, and publicly. Carl paused, then his voice turned serious. Public confrontation could work, but it's a risk. If she reacts badly, it could look volatile on your end. Are you prepared for that? I don't care how it looks, I snapped. She's putting my kids in the middle of this circus. I'm done holding back. Understood, Carl said. Then we'll file an emergency motion for temporary custody. You'll need to be ready to present your evidence. And if it goes through, the kids stay with you until the case is settled. Do it, I said without hesitation. While Carl worked on the paperwork, I reached out to Jim for one final move. I need to know everything about Jason, I said. Every skeleton in his closet, every bad decision he's ever made. Leave no stone unturned. Jim chuckled darkly. Already on it. I'll send you a file by tonight. That evening, Megan came home with her usual facade. Cheerful, dismissive, acting like she wasn't actively dismantling our family behind my back. I played along, smiling through dinner and asking the kids about their day. But inside, I was seething. After the kids were in bed, Megan settled on the couch with her wine and phone, scrolling through social media like she didn't have a care in the world. I sat down across from her, placing my phone on the coffee table. We need to talk, I said, my voice calm but firm. She barely glanced up. About what? About custody, I said bluntly. That got her attention. She set her phone down, her eyes narrowing. Custody? What are you talking about? I'm filing for temporary custody, I said. You've shown poor judgment by involving the kids in your affair. That ends now. Her face turned red, her voice rising. You have no right to take my kids away from me. They're not just your kids, I shot back. And this isn't about taking them away. It's about protecting them from the chaos you've created. She laughed bitterly. Protecting them? From what? Jason's a good man. He's better with them than you are. Jason's a married man who's been sneaking around behind his wife's back, I said coldly. That doesn't exactly scream good role model. Megan stood up, pointing a finger at me. You're just trying to punish me because you can't handle the fact that I'm happy without you. This isn't about your happiness, I said, standing up to meet her glare. This is about the kids. They don't deserve to be dragged into your mess. And if you keep pushing this, you'll lose more than just custody. Her eyes flashed with rage, but there was a hint of fear behind it. She knew I wasn't bluffing. You think you can win? She hissed. I don't think, I said, stepping closer. I know. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her, leaving me alone with the weight of what was to come. An hour later, Jim's file came through. I opened it, my eyes scanning the pages of dirt he'd dug up on Jason. Financial troubles, a DUI from 5 years ago, and rumors of workplace harassment. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to paint a picture of who Jason really was. A man as selfish and reckless as Megan. I forwarded the file to Carl, adding a note. Use this if she tries to fight the custody motion. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. It was about making sure my kids weren't collateral damage in Megan's fantasy. Tomorrow I'd be filing for custody. And Megan? She was about to learn what consequences really looked like. The next morning, the storm began. Carl had filed the emergency custody motion before sunrise, and by mid-morning, Megan was served. She came storming into the house, papers clutched in her hand, her face twisted with fury. What the hell is this? She demanded, slamming the papers on the kitchen table. I didn't flinch. It's exactly what it looks like. You're trying to take my kids from me? Her voice cracked, equal parts rage and desperation. No, I said, standing my ground. I'm protecting them. From you. From Jason. From the mess you've dragged them into. Her laugh was bitter, hollow. You don't have a leg to stand on. The judge will see right through this. They'll see that you're just a vindictive jerk who can't handle losing control. I leaned forward, meeting her glare. The judge will see the photos, the messages, and the proof that you've been parading our kids around with your affair partner. You want to test me, Megan? Let's go to court and see who walks away with custody. For a moment, the bravado in her eyes faltered. But then, as if flipping a switch, she regained her composure. You really think you're going to come out of this clean? Keep dreaming. I'll make sure you lose everything. Your kids, your business, all of it. Her words should have stung, but instead, they only fueled my resolve. You're welcome to try, I said coldly. She stormed out of the room, muttering under her breath, and I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The battle lines had been drawn, and now it was just a matter of who would outlast the other. The court hearing came faster than expected. Megan, of course, showed up with her lawyer. A smug, sharp-suited man who looked like he'd seen this kind of drama 100 times. But I had Carl, and more importantly, I had the evidence. The judge listened intently as Carl presented the photos, the texts, and the receipts from the hotel stays. Megan's lawyer tried to argue that the affair was irrelevant to her parenting ability, but Carl was relentless. She not only exposed the children to her affair partner, Carl said, his voice calm but firm, but she also placed them in a morally compromising situation. This isn't just about infidelity, it's about judgment. And my client has demonstrated far better judgment throughout this process. Megan looked pale as Carl continued to dismantle her arguments. When it was her turn to speak, she tried to play the victim, painting me as an overbearing, inattentive husband who'd driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. I was unhappy, she said, her voice trembling. He wasn't there for me. I made a mistake, but that doesn't make me a bad mother. Carl didn't even flinch. Your Honor, this isn't about her unhappiness. It's about the choices she made and how those choices impacted her children. Introducing them to her affair partner while still married shows a complete lack of discretion. By the time the hearing ended, the judge's decision was clear. Temporary custody was awarded to me, with Megan allowed supervised visitation until the case could be fully resolved. The look on her face as the ruling was announced was something I'd never forget. Shock, anger, and fear all rolled into one. For the first time, she realized she wasn't in control anymore. Back at home, the kids were with me, blissfully unaware of the chaos swirling around them. Megan had stormed out of the courtroom without a word, her lawyer trailing behind her. That evening, I sat in the quiet of the living room, reflecting on everything that had happened. The marriage, the lies, the betrayal, it had all led to this moment. And while it wasn't the ending I'd imagined, it was the one that needed to happen. Megan had tried to take everything. My kids, my business, my life. But in the end, she'd only destroyed herself. As for me, I wasn't walking away unscathed, but I was walking away stronger. And that was enough.